Teachers of Reddit. Did you ever have a student you seriously hated? It's really hard to hate a kid because you can see where they're just hurt or angry. That being said, I will let myself hate a kid who lies to get me in trouble. I had a girl tell her mom that she saw pee in my classroom. If I hadn't called her mom first and notified my IT guy, it could have been screwed me over. It may have been a cry for help from a girl needing attention, but I hate that girl now. I was a TA in college, so not quite the same, but what the heck. The thing about most TAs is that we want you to do well, and it's frustrating when someone never shows up or half-asses their work, but if they don't come complain about it, who cares? This one kid was different. He did 0 out of 5 homeworks, 10% of the grade, 0 out of 5 projects, 25% of the grade, did not do the review that was 5% of the grade, only took 1 out of the 3 exams, each 20% of the grade. Got the lowest grade in the class on the one exam he did take. He then went to complain to the dean that the class was too hard and the TAs were unfairly screwing him because we didn't like him, which prompted us TAs to have to go through a review of what he did to make sure there was nothing untoward, although since he never came to class or office hours, that made it easy to point out there wasn't much we could have done. Did I mention this was his 4th time taking the class? I used to teach summer theater camps. When I was still in high school, I was a helper, basically a counselor who helped the main teacher wrangle kids, participate in activities, etc. Me and my boyfriend were both helping out with different groups, but we would take our lunch at the same time. One day during our lunch break, he and I were in a hallway that ran along the side of the theater. I was playing an upright piano that was back there and he was standing at the edge, leaning up against it, just talking, hanging out, killing time. One of the kindergarten kids walked past the hallway and saw us from the doorway about 30 feet away. He looked at us and yelled, "Oh, Miss Jess and Mr. Boy are kissing." We laughed because WTF. We were at least 2 feet away from each other, not close enough for any physical contact, except, like, kicking, and the kid could clearly see that. A few minutes later, the director of the camp pulled me aside. She lectured me about how she understands young love, and she's still got those same teenage feelings for her husband, but we cannot act that way at work and we need to act like adults when we're there. She was as kind as she could be about it. I can't blame her. When a 6-year-old kid says he saw 2 16-year-olds making out in a dark hallway, who would you assume is lying? He was a kid and he didn't realize the consequences of his actions. But I almost got fired because he thought he was being funny. So that kid, I didn't really like. She shouldn't have automatically believed the kid. Kids that age are far from being angelic, and often will test boundaries by lying. That lady, having worked with kids, should have realized this and just walked up to you and clarified, instead of walking up like a sanctimonious bee and lecturing you. Number. Thankfully, I've been teaching for about 13 years. I have had some I seriously disliked, including one spoiled little boy who tried to stab a little girl in the eye with a wooden pencil. He hit the bridge of her nose instead. I reported it to the principal and they took it very seriously. The mother removed him from the school shortly after as we are moving to Australia. Hope the Aussie kids taught him to be a nicer boy. I hope the Aussie kids taught him to be a nicer boy. They stab each other with knives, not pencils. If you make it to high school graduation and you haven't been killed by one of your classmates or the wildlife, you are assigned a Crocodile Dundee hat, a whip, and a machete, and sent out into the workforce. I've TA'd in college, and one of the courses I ran was an observing one for advanced astronomy students using the little telescope plus instruments on our campus. Most kids love the course, but this one kid only signed up because his friend needed a partner, and clearly was expecting to just coast through without doing anything. What always annoyed me was how he was okay with me showing up to help and then wasting my time. We agreed to meet at 7 PM and promptly asking if he could leave to have dinner first. No, you told me 7 PM. Blaming me if it was cloudy, but he showed up to observe because I should have told him. No chance there are weather apps. I was helping out but remember his friend going to the bathroom at one point for example, and the two of us sitting there in awkward silence for about a minute in the observatory dome, before him asking if he should maybe do something. Note, once he asked, I helped. but I'm not going to take the initiative to run his project. That's not part of my job. The most unpardonable thing though was we had it set up so there was a group observing to midnight and then a group observing after, and he got the after midnight draw once. The 2 students from pre-midnight left after calling him to confirm he was on his way, but then the guy decided to just not go observe because he didn't feel like it. The previous students left the dome open because you don't close it if someone's on their way over to keep the air as stable as possible in the dome. Net result was this kid literally left thousands of dollars of equipment exposed to the elements overnight until the morning when the first people came in and realized what must have happened. Had it clouded over and started raining, it would have been catastrophic. Surprise surprise, it was the first time in the professor's 30-year history teaching the course that he failed a student, even though normally you get the same grade as your partner. Hence this kid assuming he would just coast through. Awkward as heck when several TAs and an astronomer are sitting around scratching our heads to think of anything we've noticed a student has learned so he can get a D, and can't manage to think of a thing. Hate might be a strong word for it, but in hindsight I was pretty happy to no longer deal with that guy. I don't mind students who take up a lot of my time, but little patience for those who waste it, and that kid wasted a hell of a lot of everyone's. As a kid starting university in a couple months, the fact that there are people like this in college too bummed me out until I read the first time in 30 years part. I'm glad he's the exception. I'm still a pretty new teacher, so I haven't had any students I really have hated, but I've had a few students that clearly don't care but still try to make my work difficult by dragging down discussions, emailing and meeting with me to ask for stupid exceptions to things they were too lazy to do, or just outright plagiarizing, which is my #1 trigger for freaking pure hatred towards a student. If you don't give a crap, please just go all the way with it. Don't fail to do work and give a bad attitude and then turn around and act like I freaking owe you a good grade anyway. I give the grades my students deserve, good or bad. It's just frustrating to have to freaking fight them on it when it's 100% their fault. My brother tells this story. He's a math teacher and one day had his class work on problems in class. Once finished, you could do other work silently. One of his students, a black chick who transferred from the city public school, was being obnoxiously loud. My brother reprimanded her. The following day she comes up to him and says, "Mr. Peter Jennings Lungs brother, I'm not calling you a racist, but you only yelled at me and not any of the white kids yesterday." Needless to say, my brother hates her. I'm not calling you a racist, but you're a racist. I've been teaching for 12 years. It's tough to hate a kid. I've had some rough ones. I had a 4-year-old that would try to gouge out the other kid's eyes. No joke, he would try to get his thumbs in the eye sockets of the kids. But he was adopted and his birth mother kept him strapped into a car seat for the first 2 years of his life and never let him out. He didn't last long in the school. I didn't hate him, just felt horrible for him. I've had students who disrupt the class all the time. They are just crying out for attention, and if you talk to them enough, you can generally get through to them. Not always. I have seen some kids I taught when they were 8 and now 18, and still generally in bad shape. They just grow up to be bad parents. Spoiling kids does that. It makes them lazy and self-absorbed. These kids are also generally raised by a nanny, not their parents. These are the kids I hate. Hate is a very strong word though. I just wish I could get through to them and let them know that having large amounts of money and parents that bend to everything you want isn't going to help them be better human beings in life. Kids thrive on being given jobs that make them feel important. Ask a 4-year-old if they can hold open a door for you to help you out or just be polite. They generally feel like they are a superhero. My not even 2-year-old son beams when he helps us load the dishes in the dishwasher or walks around the house trying to help sweep. Kids want to help and be adults. If you reward them with a good job, they will love you for it. You don't need to give them money or toys for doing chores. Just show them that it really meant something to you. A lot of it has to do with their upbringing. The best ones are the kids who have parents who treat them with respect. Don't give them every whim and talk to them like adults even when they are smaller. It's tough being a kid and being told what to do every day. Can you imagine getting ordered around all day? Of course most kids would act out. It's a tough line to walk, giving them the freedom to do what they would like to do and making sure they are following by guidelines and rules set in place. but make sure you are fully letting them know what exactly you are looking for and you stick to it. Honestly though, they are far and few between. Most kids are decent. It's just the bad ones that stick out in your mind because they are trying to stand out. I know I kind of rambled on. It's a bad habit, but I love teaching kids and helping people with ideas on how to help their kids out. But I feel the more kids I help, the more our world can have better leaders in the future. In 15 years of teaching, I have hated maybe one kid I can say I hated. He basically mind-fricked a girl so bad she committed suicide, kidnapped another girl, ran a police blockade and is in prison. He was 16. Whoa, I think it's time for more details. In the gifted program in my elementary school, there was a kid who was regularly sent to the front office. One time, on his way there, he rubbed the side of his face so it was bright red and then told the principal that the teacher had smacked him. Of course, everyone in the class testified against him, and the teacher would never hit a kid. If she would have though, it would probably be that kid. It's a really devious thing to do for a 9-year-old. My mom teaches 8th grade special ed, mild moderate. She is one of the chillest, sweetest, and most relaxed people you will ever meet. She has a true talent for getting the bad kids to give up the act and they always end up loving her. I typically love hearing about her students and ask her all the time if she has any new stories. She started to tell me about this kid, Grant, who she hadn't been able to connect with. She said he never really talked to her, but one day started to make throat slashing gestures with his finger and then let his head roll to the side, sort of like mimicking decapitation. He was doing it repeatedly and making these gestures in a way that suggested it would be mom getting her head cut off. It seriously creeped me out and I thought this kid was straight up disturbed. Then, after a few weeks of that, he started to make these explosion noises where he would bounce his fist off of his chest, like a bomb, and make the noise with his mouth. All of this was taught her again. For the first time, she told me she did not care that they weren't connecting. She just wanted him gone. She was scared. Then he started saying he forgot his book in his locker, so when she let him go get it, he'd come back into the room with it under his hoodie so that it was unclear what he was holding exactly. My mom said when she first saw it, she thought, "This is it. It's finally happening. He has a gun." He was freaking with her, and while her reaction may sound overly paranoid, these recent school shootings have been no joke. She can find compassion for almost every person in every situation, but she was excited to see him leave her class at the end of the year. I have worked with kids throughout most of my life, babysitting, helping with youth groups, Sunday school, and daycare. I never ever meet a kid I truly disliked until Aaron. It was summertime at one of our local daycares. I was in charge of the 5-year-old class, which was awesome. It's an age where you don't have to spend every minute wondering who is pooping their pants right now. The group was really great. Smart, funny kids who got along with each other well, except Aaron. This kid would cry over everything. He wanted so-and-so's toy. Blank was being mean to him. And the amount of times I heard "that's not fair" when I told him no was astronomical. He would scream and throw tantrums, disturbing everyone during nap time, including the kids in the 2 adjoining classrooms. Oftentimes the tantrums involved hitting me and trying to bite when I would have to physically remove him from the others. I tried talking to him. I tried talking to the other kids about maybe just doing their best to be super nice to this oversensitive little person. To their credit, the kids really did try to include him and have patience. As I said, they were a great group, but even good kids reach their limit. Eventually enough was enough and I asked my director if I could speak with Aaron's mother about what was going on. She consented and so I had an appointment with Big Mama. I don't know why I had hope for this changing anything, but it was hugely optimistic on my part, and I was shown the error of my delusion quickly. Aaron's mom starts out whining, quite literally whining, to me about how none of the kids like him and are mean to him. Same broken record I hear from the kid day in and day out. I repeat to her what I tell him. They would like Aaron more if he didn't cry when someone looked at him, if he shared better, if he didn't scream unholy terror during nap time, if he would learn to wipe his ever-running nose after said tantrums. I mentioned that I had talked to the others about trying to be his friend, but it just frustrated everyone to have to look the other way when he acted out. It all fell on deaf ears. Aaron's mom, it became clear to me, was propagating his victim status. A month or so later I was transferred to the 2-year-old room and I was never so happy to be wondering who was pooping at that minute. Only time I hate students is when the parents get involved and not at the same time. Please let him eat in class. He hit a student. Oh haha. He was just having a bad time. So I have this student who always eats candy in class, refuses to participate, and when he isn't pretending to shoot me he is just playing with himself. If you do anything he doesn't like he squeals like a pig. I've physically removed him from class twice now and oh I want to hate him. Some days I just want to smash my fists in his 8-year-old face and stand over his as he squeals and cries. Oh I would feel so much pleasure in seeing that, but I don't, because that wouldn't solve anything. He is afraid because everyone makes fun of him and acts out in a shock valuist kind of way which makes it worse. He lacks confidence because of this and he lacks discipline because to be frank, his mother makes a decision with him on what is more immediately easier. Oh I've picked up little piggy and restrained him as he has tried attacking me, but every time afterwards I make sure he knows what Viz has done, and then I find a way to reward him for something else, to try and build his confidence. He is improving. Slowly, but surely, and it will take a long time to have him as a normal student, but for as long as he is in my class we will work towards that goal. I would just like to say you are doing an awesome thing by really working this kid and making an effort to improve his life. There needs to be more teachers like you. OHH. For sure. I was teaching community college. For profit Rasmussen. Really dedicated teachers who work there and take their crap very seriously. But they teach some quite brain dead students who don't know why they are there and are racking up some serious debt at the same time. And I had a lovely little piece of white trash in my composition class. Third from the back row. She would wear low-cut t-shirts to show off cleavage. Never bring one book. Text during class. Got pregnant by the boyfriend who then left her. Didn't see that one coming. And never, ever turned in homework. I, being the wonderful person I am, never cut her a break because I never cut any other student a break. I laid out all my prerequisites for passing in the syllabus that I referenced quite a number of times. Come the end of the term she was pulling an F. Big surprise, and she asked for me to give her some lifelines so that she didn't fail. I was very upfront. I showed her what she was missing, what her grade was and what she had to do in order to pull up to a D. She begged and pleaded. I said, I'm sorry, but that's what you have to do. Full on tears. She wanted a passing grade for no work. Sorry lady, can't help you there. She blows out of the room and right to the dean of students. She was in a second class of mine, internet technologies, as well and had shown just as much inclination in doing work there as well. So I get called into the office and the dean is trying to work out an agreement. I showed the dean and this dopey chick the grades, the syllabus, etc. I made sure everybody who was listening knew that I was not going to give any bump in a grade until this work was done and that it had to be done before the end of term. About 1 week, with Big Test Part 2, meeting ended and I get called into the president's office where I was sacked. Why? Because I was going to fail a student who was paying money and the school didn't want to lose the federal loan $. She won. I lost and I have refused to teach again since that time. Terrible. Dang, I hated that chick. Awful right down to the core. That's crap that you got fired. As a third-year teacher, I've had 99% pleasant experiences. This past year, however, our grade had one student that made the whole year, every day, a living heck. This student was an ED student, emotionally disturbed, who was different than the others I have dealt with. Other students have variations of autism. His disability, as written on his IEP, was for being irritable. I have no idea how this was written into a legal document, but it was. Anywho, this kid has to have affluenza. There is literally no way to describe it. Mom and dad are divorced. Mom buys him new $300 sneakers every week, the whole 9 yards. First week of school, calls in a bomb threat. Doesn't get suspension as it was a manifestation of his disability. Every day he puts on a show in every class, making fun of minorities, using racial slurs, calling teachers molesters, yelling things like anal sex etc. All for shoots and giggles. He never was suspended, stayed in school all day every day and made it impossible to teach a whole lesson. He always interrupted the flow of the whole group lesson and you couldn't meet with small groups because he would always disrupt everyone else working independently. He never turned in any work but his parents would ignore emails about not completing work, then call all P off when report cards came home and say the school wasn't supplying adequate services. At the end of the year no one signed his yearbook and no one said bye to him. And I didn't even feel bad. I can tell if I hated him. But he finally got what he deserved on the last day. Thanks for listening to me vent Reddit. That any student with an IEP can only be suspended for a certain number of days per year is ridiculous. This means that a kid with accommodations for having diabetes can be a complete jerk and get away with anything. And the administration legally can't do anything about it. I've had my fair share of crappy kids and you can excuse 99% of them because they're kids. I teach teenagers, and they're immature, and even when they mean you harm, you can always trace it back to some issue they have internally or at home. So it's all justifiable to some degree, except this one sucker. This one fat frick of a student was failing my class and was a pain in the butt with his attitude and annoying personality. In general, he just was not a cool guy. Through and through. I always got a creepy vibe from him, but I didn't want to treat him any differently, so I tried my best to help him pick up his grade and learn the material. Anyways, during the spring right after progress reports, his mom came into an intervention meeting with the principal where this idiot student said that the clothes I wore were too skimpy and he could always see my bra and underwear, and it was distracting him and that's why he was failing the class. Apparently he went on and on about my outfits and was making all this insane accusations about me being flirty with him or whatever. Anyways, my principal knew it was crap and called him out on it. I wasn't present to defend myself, but he still needed to have a talk with me. I was already at my breaking point of the year and I flipped out in that meeting. Bear in mind my classroom was freezing most of the time, so I almost always wore work pants and blazers over sweaters. And I gave him attention because he was carrying a 30% in my class and I wanted him to pick up his grade because otherwise he wouldn't graduate high school. My boss told me he didn't believe a single word the kid said, but he needed to talk to me just for documentation's sake. It was the most awkward meeting ever. Didn't help that I was furious, and it was made worse with the skeevy nature of the entire thing. This was 5 years ago and I'm still scarred. I seriously loathed this kid afterwards. Mostly due to the violating nature of his accusation, because honestly, who has the sick mind to use that as a reason for failing a class? Say I'm a bad teacher or make up some other stupid excuse. Don't sexually harass me with your eyes and then tell people about it. It gave me great satisfaction to fail him, although I found out after the summer that he dropped out of high school and started selling drugs across the border. I'm sure he had some problem that might have justified his behavior, but honestly he was a sick frick and I really worry for society now that he's in it full time. He did a lot of creepy crap during the year, not including punching a preschooler on his block and almost stomping a kitten to death when I took them out on a field trip to see colleges. If a classmate didn't intervene, he would have killed that poor thing. Don't worry, if he is selling drugs in Mexico he is likely going to be killed sooner or later. I'm not a teacher, but the school's IT guy. We've recently went to a one environment where every kid has their own laptop purchased by the school. I have the unenviable task of making sure that the students don't take naked pictures of themselves with the webcams and save them on school-owned property. They do, a lot. When it's caught, the student is usually expelled for the remainder of the year. One boy, an 11th grader, was found with naked pictures saved on his laptop of 6 different girls at the school, all under 16. All of the girls were expelled as the pictures sent were found on their laptops as well. The boy was suspended for 1 week. I don't hate that kid, but he has no idea that he's basically ruined the foreseeable future for 6 girls. Yeah, they were dumb to send the pictures, but he was extremely manipulative in getting them, and he doesn't care what happened. I tried like heck to find out if he sent them to anyone else, but short of keylegging and breaking into his email, it wasn't happening. In a small town like where I live and work, the stigma of something like this stays around for a long time. Not hated, but it's hard to not be upset when a kid is doing something to push your buttons or get you in trouble with their parent. There have been times when a student has done something so frustrating that I've had to turn around and walk away from them completely so I wouldn't get angry. I don't think I'm paid enough to deal with a child who punches, kicks, throws things at, or hits me. We were on a field trip to Washington, D.C. One of my students was extraordinarily overweight, almost a perfect sphere, not that I care, but this comes into play later. When we were leaving the Smithsonian, she refused to continue walking after we walked out the front door and sat down on a bench. We had plans to get on the bus, even though it's only a few blocks, and eat at the Hard Rock. My only words to her were, "We're going to miss the bus if we don't start walking." Nothing about her weight, nothing but what's quoted above. She got up after rolling her eyes and walked the block and a half to the bus. When she called home that night, she told her mother that I said that she couldn't eat because she was fat and that she didn't need to have lunch. Mum raised a huge hissy fit. Naturally, had that actually happened I wouldn't have blamed her, and refused to believe me over her daughter, even though every student in my group stood up and said that I hadn't said anything of the sort. Anyway, I hated that student after that. I feel so bad for even disliking her because she has some severe learning disabilities. However, one little lady I teach is quite the stubborn madam. She picks and chooses when she wants help, who she wants to help her, and whether she wants to do something or not, and if she doesn't get her way she sulks for ages. To make it worse, people have been pandering to her for years and saying how independent she is because she makes all these choices. Really, she's just manipulative and pretty spoiled. If she doesn't get her own way she will dig her nails in you or swing on your arm while she walks, twisting and pulling so much that I've had to have actual treatment on my back because of the strain. If you call her on this behavior she just gives you a look of smug disdain because she knows there's nothing you can do. She makes me so angry. However, I try so hard to be firm but nice to her. She has problems and I know it must be frustrating for her to be stuck in a body that doesn't work right and be unable to communicate fully. It's just annoying as heck when it gets thrown back in your face. At which point I tell myself that after class I get to go home to my lovely apartment and my lovely partner and she gets to go back to her care home where she will live for the rest of her life. Probably should have used a throwaway for this one. I don't hate any of my students, but the ones that are disruptive smartasses and don't care about learning are hard to like. Smartasses who still do the work and slackers who keep to themselves aren't ideal, but manageable. It's the kids who don't give a crap and constantly try to disrupt lessons that can derail classes and change the whole class dynamic by convincing kids who are on the fence to start acting up as well. One kid can change a group from being one I enjoy teaching to one where I just go back and forth between redirecting students and looking at the clock, waiting for the class to end. Oh my goodness. Yes, one year I taught a 6-year-old girl who wet herself every time someone told her number. For example, she would ask if she could color longer, and I would say, "I'm sorry, no, coloring time is over for today." Then she would stand up, widen her legs, and take a pee, and she usually wore skirts, so the urine would just fall straight to the floor. It was terrible. I tried to tell myself that she needed serious help, and that it was not her fault, but I couldn't help hating her, due to the copious amounts of pee I had to clean up that year. Usually the students I punish the most are my favorite students. I enjoy their rebellious behavior. That being said, I can't stand snobby boss students who bear through them and their mother's subsequent comments about their child needing more attention or leniency. I've never had a student I couldn't get to behave except one, a paranoid early teenager. Let's call him Vladimir. At first he was a great student. We talked and we joked, but he quickly turned on any student, often swearing at the inner combination of Ukrainian and Russian. This was in western Ukraine back in 2010, Lviv, to be precise, and he was Russian ethnicity. Oh, I had plenty of Russian students, but by the gods he was paranoid. After class I would talk with him about his swearing, about putting down students, and he'd tell me they wanted to kill him. His English was better than everyone else's and he'd often rub it in their faces, but eventually I opened another class that better accommodated him. He complained the homework was too easy, so I assigned more difficult home which he would do at all. His mother would ground him because of this, blame me and blame him, making everyone miserable and untrusting. It was a few days before his birthday when I finally threw him out. "Now I don't get to have a happy birthday," he said. My mother tell me I can't have happy birthday because you didn't give me homework. I was going to have happy birthday on Saturday. Now I can't. I was going to invite you for happy birthday. BLEED. Who you are a lousy teacher, but wait. Why did I kick him out? I remember there was an assignment. Oh yes, about Ukraine. There had been homework. He'd done it, but filled it with swear words and refused to turn it. I told him that due to his swearing, his blatant anger to other students, and inability to sit still in his class that he was not welcome back. I hated him at the time. Though on retrospect I know my mistakes. I was too lenient at first with the swearing. I pandered to his paranoia and would let him get away with too much. Though it hurt to have him going from saying, "You're my favorite teacher," to that. TL. Doctor. Student was paranoid and I took away his happy birthday. Goddammit, Boris. I had a student once who was just straight up scary. As an 8th grader he was already huge, and when you looked at him, he looked back in a way that made you think he wouldn't mind punching you in the face. He was expelled after throwing a basketball in a girl's face from a couple feet away and knocking out her front tooth. He's the only student in 5 years I could say I almost hated, but it was really more a feeling of being completely unnerved. Although not officially a teacher, I was a T-back at my university. I just really hated this one particular guy because he thought I was his best friend, but he was an extremely abrupt, rude, super right-wing, Marine Corps war veteran who all in all wasn't the best student in the world. The only real thing we had in common is that we were both veterans. What he took as friendship was honestly my taking a professional interest in helping him catch up with the rest of the class. It was one of those situations where I was in a position where I had to be nice to the guy because it was my job, but honestly he really rubbed me the wrong way and I couldn't bring myself to be honest with him about it. I had a student named B. B was a 5th year senior and did absolutely nothing in my class. He swaggered in, refused to work, and at the end of every 6 weeks, it was a 1-semester class, he would saunter up to me asking to have the work he missed. He had perfect attendance. He just hadn't turned anything in. I would dutifully give him copies of all the daily grades and he would turn in absolute crap by the end of the week. A few sentences scrawled illegibly on maybe half the questions. He was too lazy to even answer on a separate sheet of paper, which is what was obviously intended. A decade ago, B would have failed with no questions asked. Today, however, with NLCB and race to the top, districts will bend over backwards to avoid failing any kid. I failed the kid for 6 weeks in a row and he flunked the final exam. No surprise. Then the counselors start working on me. I get the sob story that B only has to pass my class to graduate. I check his grades in the other courses and respond to the counselors that B is failing multiple classes. Oh, the grades for credit recovery classes don't matter, they said. It became clear that the administration was eyeing me. If I gave the okay, the kid would pass. As a 2nd year teacher, I decided to pass B to avoid getting a rundown by the administration. After giving B the greatest gift he has ever gotten in his entire life, a completely unearned high school diploma, I returned to my room. He had been pestering me at every opportunity during that last week of school, and apparently he had decided to write his name on a hand-drawn poster that had taken me days to make, just to be cute, I guess. So I hate B. I'm not mature enough to not hate people sometimes, and students are people. Mostly I end up hating a student in the long run rather than how I end up hating people at bars, which is instantaneous. In the long run a student can go out of their way to make my life so much more difficult than it could be otherwise, and I just have no choice. The sort of teachers who answer no to this question are probably the sort who just don't really hate people as often as I do. I don't teach, but one of my long-term substitutes and I were somewhat close. There's this boy, who we'll call Boy, who used to harass the living crap out of her. Boy's in my grade, and he wants to get expelled from school because he doesn't care about education. He would call her fat, throw things, bang on the walls, and act crazy in general. She was going through a really bad divorce and he would make fun of her husband leaving her. It was pretty fricked up. She told me that she couldn't stand him and I didn't really blame her. She was barely making any money from subbing and I felt bad that she had to deal with such negativity. I worked in a daycare center for a few years. There were only 2 kids during that time that I disliked. Abby and Emily. They were the 2 sweetest looking, blonde hair, blue-eyed little porcelain dolls. I am convinced that these children are demons. Let's start with Abby. She was the meanest 4-year-old I had ever met. She would physically attack us when she was upset, poo her pants on purpose and make us change her, trip us during nap time, and spit on us. When reprimanded, she would just stare at us blankly and walk away. If put on timeout, she would pee her pants on purpose. She was an evil little child that literally had no good qualities. I know it was all for attention, but holy crap, she was a handful. I do not miss her in the slightest. Emily was just a creepy little girl. She was very quiet and very sneaky. We would catch her hitting the other children with a huge smile on her face. She once dug her fingernails so deep into a younger child's arm that she drew blood. She also drew pictures of me on fire more than once. No thank you. I wonder what happened to these two, especially Emily. I hope she got psychiatric help later on. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.